So let me first say something about my own connection to the Palestinian struggle. I often point out that I first became involved in Palestine solidarity movements when I was an undergraduate at Brandeis University, which of course was founded in the same year as the State of Israel. And years ago were Jewish. So of course it was pointed out that last summer, summer before last actually, I participated in a Women of Color and Indigenous feminist delegation to Palestine, along with Gina Dent, who was a member of the panel yesterday. And I first encountered Queers for BDS when Gina and I were talking to Judith Butler because she had made a recent trip. And she says, if you don't see anyone else in Palestine, you should connect with BDS, Queers for BDS. And so we were wondering how to do this when Haith and Palestine showed up in Nablus, and as she pointed out yesterday, we had an absolutely amazing afternoon. So let me see, I have a few minutes left. So what I would like to say is not so much what's indicated in the program, that I will offer my share my critical analysis and give recommendations for the experiences of the Palestinian queer movement. Instead, I want to talk about what I've learned and what has most impressed me about the global activism of PQ-BDS, Pinkwashing Israel, and Al-Cause. And what has been most impressive to me is the commitment to work on theoretical and practical terrain that is broad and expansive rather than narrow and restrictive. And I know that we often use the term intersectionality. It has come up many times over the course of the last, over the course of the two workshops. But I often wonder whether we shouldn't continue to search for formulations that come closer to what we mean when we say we don't want to focus on single issue approaches, but rather we want to use approaches that require us to think very deeply about the links and connections and relations among the issues and struggles. And perhaps I can say that having experienced the history that led to this term, I'm aware that there were many other terms used on the way, and we use these terms as a way of trying to approximate and to grope towards an understanding. And I think sometimes we use the shortcut of the term intersectionality in order not to continue that process of reflecting on all of the very complicated ways in which we are related. In the US, the term that's often used to refer to particular issues or movements is special interests. Queer movements constitute a special interest. I don't think Palestinian solidarity is even given the status of constituting a special interest. But the point that I want to make is that the approach that we are talking about now is one that does not allow for that kind of assumption about special interests that generally refer to individuals who are engaged in particular kinds of activities. The individual is not the constant point of reference, which is it's really so refreshing to be out of the US, where we don't always have to challenge the constant individualization that happens, especially under the impact of neoliberal ideologies. We talk about collectivities and communities. And the notion of intersectionality, as we often use it, often assumes a single point of crossing, a point where axes cross each other. And even though that point need not be necessarily conceived of as an individual, it's too often expressed in terms of an individual embodying the crossing of these axes. And so what happens is that the more we try to complicate ideas of struggle using concepts of race, class, gender, sexuality, nation, ability, etc., it seems that we move from broad categories to more restrictive ones. It seems that we are constantly narrowing our focus. And so this is what the work around BDS that has been done by the Palestinian Queers for BDS and the other organization has demonstrated to me that it is possible to engage in this work while expanding our terrain of struggle. And I think the critique of pinkwashing is really important in this respect, because it has not only revealed the shallowness and the cynical and contemptuous character of the democracy that Israel purports to represent, but it broadens the terrain of struggle against the occupation and against the Zionist policies of Israel. This is to say that Queers for BDS not only directs its message at people who identify into LGBTQ communities, and it's important to direct our messages in that direction. But it's not a question of saying simply support queer individuals in Palestine. In fact, it's clear about not wanting support from those who refuse to see that cynicism and that contemptuousness behind Israel's pro-gay image, but rather it directs its message at anyone who is a potential supporter of BDS. And it provides, it seems to me, a different kind of literacy. It allows us to read the racism and the violence that is covered up by the putatively pro-gay stance of Israel in a different way. And ideology is very powerful. Queer BDS, what is queer BDS? That's the title of this panel. Queer BDS, it seems to me, can help radical forces around the world to develop new ways of engaging in ideological struggle. And as I said before, the panel yesterday was really remarkable, and the contributions here, I've learned so much just sitting here over the last few minutes, and I have 2 minutes left. Yes. Oh, wow, you gave me 3. I have 2 on my timer. And so I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that what might appear to be small and marginal is actually vast and central. And it is primarily because of the Zionist lobby that Palestine's solidarity has been assumed to be marginal. And let me say that in my experience over the last period, increasing numbers of people are joining the call. And my experience has been in speaking to people, and especially black audiences in the US, about the nature of Israeli apartheid. Their response is, why has not anyone told us about this? We didn't know this. And on many occasions, I mentioned the Palestinian freedom writers who were inspired by, of course, the freedom writers in the early 1960s. Now, let me just say that I've been thinking a lot in the recent period, in the last year, about June Jordan, who was an amazing black feminist poet who died about 5 years ago, I think. 4 years ago. How long ago was it? 2009, right? Yeah? Earlier. Well, I still find it very difficult to believe that she's no longer with us. But she really dedicated her life to persuading people at a time when Palestine solidarity was even more unpopular than it is today. And so I just want to conclude with the words of her poem, which have circulated widely. You all know them, but I've been thinking about those words quite frequently during this last period. And I was born a black woman, and now I am become Palestinian. Thank you.